I'm hoping to get 72 pounds of potatoes from these 46 seed potatoes. And a lot of that will come down to how I plant them. Last year, my potatoes dealt with quite a bit of scab, which I'm sure didn't help their yield. This year, I'm taking a more proactive approach to dealing with the potato scab. I have a goal of growing 650 pounds of food from my small backyard, and potatoes are a large percentage of that. But the thing with potatoes is while they are fairly high yielding, they aren't incredibly nutrient dense. So if I want to increase my yield to 72 pounds, I need to do that without giving them any additional space. That means I need to set the potatoes up properly from the beginning to get the highest yield possible from the space I give them. This year, I decided to plant the potatoes in trenches rather than digging individual holes for each seed potato. My thought behind this is that because I'm disturbing the soil, digging up the trenches, the soil around the seed potatoes will be lighter and fluffier to start, therefore giving the potatoes more room to fill in with their tubers. Potatoes really do much better if the soil is a little bit light and fluffy and not so clay-like. Now, to deal with the potato scab, I'm doing a couple things. The first is that potato scab doesn't grow as well in acidic soils as it does alkaline soils. And based on my soil tests that I did earlier this spring, I know that my soil is quite alkaline. So I need to do everything I can to try and bring those pH numbers down into the acidics. The first way I'm doing this is by adding some peat moss to the trench. Peat moss is naturally acidic, and it helps when mixed in with other soils. It does help to buffer the pH a little bit. I'm also adding aluminum sulfate, which is the soil acidifier of this mix, to help bring that pH down some more. And then as a fertilizer to kind of get the potatoes kick-started in growth, I'm using blood meal. Blood meal too is good for alkaline soils because it's naturally acidic. So again, helping to bring that pH level down. This year, I'm only growing one variety of potato, the variety called Yukon Gold. I'm planting the potatoes about 1 potato per square foot, giving them lots of room to form nice large tubers. Last year, I planted 3 types, the Yukon Gold, a russet, and a red fingerling. While the russets were high yielding like the Yukon Golds were, we just didn't tend to gravitate towards them when it came to eating. The red fingerlings were a pain in the butt. Trying to dig out all those tiny little red potatoes was more aggravation than it was worth. And to add insult to injury, I didn't even like the flavor of them. I found them incredibly dry. I think nailing down the variety to just the Yukon Gold, because they're high yielding and because we like the flavor, will help increase the yield just from the get-go, because I won't be messing around with all the other different variables of the other varieties. Before planting, I cut some of the larger seed potatoes in half in order to have enough pieces of potato to plant out the full 46 square feet that I have dedicated to potatoes. You want to do this a couple days before you're ready for planting so that the potatoes have enough time to dry out and form a little bit of a skin where you've cut them so that they're a little less likely to rot in the ground while they're getting their feet under them and sprouting. Once I had all the seed potatoes lined up in the trench, I added more peat moss, again to just help with that fluffy soil and to help with that pH. Then I covered the rest of the trench with the native soil. One thing I hate about planting potatoes is that after all that work of digging trenches, amending, getting those seed potatoes in there, it still looks like I did nothing at all when I'm done. That is until they start to get their feet under them and their leaves push through the soil. If all this work amending and prepping these beds for the potatoes doesn't work, I'm not sure what will, but these potatoes need to hold their weight and produce 72 pounds. Once the potato leaves break through the soil, I'll start fertilizing once every other week with a phosphorus-heavy fertilizer. I know that my soil is very light on the phosphorus, and the potatoes will benefit greatly from a little bit more phosphorus nutrition. Another way to help combat potato scab is by keeping the soil evenly moist. I'll do this by being diligent with my watering and also adding a heavy layer of mulch. The mulch I'll use is grass clippings. We're gonna start cutting the grass here, if not this weekend, the weekend next. And I'll use all those grass clippings to keep the beds of potatoes mulched up well. This helps with both water retention, but it also keeps the sunlight off the developing tubers, stopping them from turning green. I was looking back at some photos to see how long it took for the potatoes to break the surface in previous years and take over the bed. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to know if I had a little window of 30 to 60 days to maybe interplant a quick spring crop in between my rows of potatoes before they took over the bed. And I think I do. I think as long as I keep the varieties under 60 days, I'll have enough time to get a few quick crops up and growing before the potatoes completely engulf the bed. So along the back of both potato beds, I decided that I wanted to try growing some shelling peas and some snap peas. My thought is that the peas will get up and growing and be tall enough to outcompete the potatoes for sunlight and produce a crop of peas before they get too shaded out by the potatoes. For me, peas are kind of done by the beginning of July, and the potatoes will be ready to harvest shortly after that, in mid-July to early August. I also decided I wanted to try a row of spinach to cut for baby spinach, some salad turnips, little white turnips that are great for roasting, and try some toy choy, which is like a little cousin to bok choy. All of these crops do well before your first frost, which we are still a few weeks before frost is over, and I imagine with the way the weather's been going this year, we'll have a late frost for sure. It has not been very warm yet. So all of these crops should enjoy this cold weather, and they should all be able to germinate in the not super hot soil. In my other bed, I'm trying some kale, seeded quite densely for some baby kale, some French breakfast radishes, which are incredibly quick to get up, growing, and producing their roots, so that should work out well, and some true bok choy. If you'll notice, I have planted the turnips and the radishes in the center of both those beds. My thought process being that I can harvest those crops all at once, and they might be a little bit quicker to mature than some of the leafy greens. We'll see how it goes, but I figured it would be easy to just like harvest those all out as soon as they start getting pinched out for sunlight. And then near the edges, there would be slightly less competition, and it would be easier for me to reach the edges for like cut and come again kind of style greens than it would be to try to reach in the middle of the beds. I have not ever tried interplanting anything with potatoes, so this might be a massive fail. But if it does work, it allows me to use space that otherwise would just sit empty and kind of look sad for a month or two. Once the potatoes get growing, they get growing fast, so it'll just be a matter of timing. If I've timed it right, maybe some years when we have a warmer spring, this would work better. With this cooler spring that we're having, maybe nothing will germinate fast enough or get growing fast enough to make it work. But there's only one way to find out. And I'm sure I'll learn a few things from this experiment, crops that did well and crops that didn't, that I can refine for next year. If you've ever interplanted anything with your potatoes, I would love to hear what you picked and if it worked. I feel like there's an opportunity there. Because they take up so much room and they take a while underground before they break the surface, we should be able to grow something with our potatoes. And these early spring crops would be incredibly valuable in my kitchen because I am fresh out of greens. I am out of green beans, I am out of broccoli. The lettuce is looking a little sad and gonna be a little late this year. Now we just have to wait and see, will this prep and amending help combat some of the potato scab? Will the variety I chose and the prep help increase my yield to 72 pounds? And is potato a under thought of crop for interplanting? In the next one, we'll finally be planting out our onions, which I have a goal of 40 pounds of onions from half the space.